Hey everyone, this is the Mind Workshop podcast where we get experts and just sometimes happy people, get them on the podcast and talk about their perspective. Today we have Amy, and today we're going to be talking about creating happiness from within, the power of daily choices. I'm really excited to go through it. She's going to go through an intro of who she is, and then we're going to dive in right to our topic. Amy, thank you so much for joining today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, well, it's a laundry list of different things that I've done, but currently I am a transformational public speaker, mindfulness and life coach that help people who feel stuck in a rut and lost their happiness to shift their mindset so that they can go from just surviving to thriving in both their personal and professional lives.
Yes. And I feel like so many of us are in that survival mind state. And I usually call that like the default mind state, where we're always, especially us in America, where we're always in that keeping up with the Joneses. Like we got to have that nice car, we got to have that nice house. And we're always stuck in that, going back to that default mind state saying, "Oh, once I have those things, then someone will love me. Then I can love myself." And I feel like so many of us get trapped in that same thing. But I think like the first realization for me is like first getting out of saying these thoughts are just our thoughts, that these are things that can actually be changed. What are your thoughts on how to get out of that survival mind state to really start thriving? What are your first action items that you would have someone do?
Well, it's challenging because society
Mhm.
has told us what we should want to have, what we should want to do. But when we really get quiet and get in touch with ourselves, we realize that those kinds of things don't really make us happy. How many times have you put forth a goal and actually achieved it and thought, when I get, figure it, whatever it is, whether it's when I get so much money in the bank, or when I lose this much weight, or when I buy this house, or when I have a person that loves me in my life, then I'm going to be, and you get that. And then you don't feel any different. And the reason
Yeah.
why we don't feel any different is because happiness is not something that is achieved through external forces, things that we do, things that we have, but is something that's internal. And when we realize that it's something that we have internally that we carry with us every day and we can just tap into in a moment's notice, we can definitely shift our mindset.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. What are other some how else is happiness found from inside rather from outside? How can you start that mind shift to really start saying, "Oh, rather than making your external environment being the piece that makes you happy, how can you adapt it to saying, "Hey, you have to be happy on the inside in order for it really to take place?" How do you start that mindset shift?
Well, my first step in everything that I teach is that you have to be aware, right? Because if you're not aware that you're unhappy or that you're connecting your happiness to achieving something that's outside of yourself, then it's kind of hard to have a perspective change when you don't even realize where it's starting from. So the first step is usually awareness. And then the second step is curiosity and the intention to make a change. And that's uncomfortable for a lot of people, right? Because when we do something that we've not done before, it's uncomfortable, it's unfamiliar. And so getting comfortable with being uncomfortable
Yeah.
will allow us to take the next step, which is action. And having steps that we put in place, action items that we do to get in touch with the happiness within, is the third step. So, those are the three steps that I typically take people through. And then the next thing that people normally ask me is, well, what kind of things, they want to jump to the end, right? What kind of things can we do in order to, get happy? And there's a variety of things that we can do. As a matter of fact, I have a whole 12 things to shift your mindset from negative to a positive. But I'd like to just, if we can, just touch on a couple of them.
Yeah, let's do
Would
it.
that be good? All right.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I always default to is gratitude. And Victor, do you have a gratitude practice?
I do. Actually, I just did it. Every single morning when I wake up, I meditate for like less than a minute, like usually like a minute, 2 minutes, and then after that, I say three things I'm grateful for today. And I usually say I'm grateful for this, grateful for that, and grateful for that. And because a lot of people didn't get those things today, they didn't wake up and they were alive, or like things like that. So that's my gratitude practice that I have each day.
Can I share something that can like literally be lighter fuel on your gratitude practice?
Let's do it.
All right. So I do the same thing. Before my eyes even open in the morning, I think of three things that I'm grateful for. And just like you, I used to do the same thing. I used to ramble off the things that I was seriously grateful for. And then I realized that there was a secret sauce to it that I didn't know. So I'm going to share it with you and all the viewers and listeners here today. And that is the secret sauce to light it on fire is you have to actually feel the gratitude. There's a huge difference between saying, "Oh, I'm grateful for my health," and really feeling like thinking about back in COVID times where people weren't able to breathe, and then thinking about what would it be like if I was on a ventilator. And literally a lot of these things that I'm so grateful for, thinking about not having it almost brings me to tears. And then when I realize I don't have to be sad, I don't have to be, thinking about what life would be like without the thing that I'm grateful for, you get a flood of emotion. And that emotion is gratitude. And that is what shifts and gets things set up. And starting our day is a great way with gratitude is a great way to create and cultivate happiness throughout our day, right? Because then it kind of sets our mind up for seeking out other things that we're going to be grateful for. So the next morning when we wake
Yeah.
up, we'll have, sometimes you lay in bed. Now, how many times some people, Victor, go through what I call refiner's fires, right? Or a season or a moment or a day that is just crappy, right? Everything went wrong. Things aren't going the way that we intended. And so to
Mhm.
find gratitude in those moments can be kind of tough. And
Yeah.
so whenever I'm in one of those moments, look, we're all human. We have those moments, even those that are mindfulness and mindset coaches and do our gratitudes. We have moments like that. The difference is that I think of my grandpa in those moments. I don't know about you, but I think of my grandpa.
Uh
And he
huh.
he always says to me, every day that you wake up on this side of the grass is a good day. So even if you're in the worst season, even if everything is going wrong, there's always something in our lives that we can be grateful for. Like you mentioned, grateful that you woke up that day. There's some people on this planet that don't have that. The fact that you got out of bed, don't think about the fact that you had to hit the snooze alarm 500 times to do it, or that you got up at noon. But the fact that you got out of bed is another thing to be grateful. The fact you could walk, the fact that you could go to the bathroom, the fact that there's so many things to be grateful for, even when we're in our worst seasons.
Yeah. And usually what happens is when when you are seeing that everything is going wrong, that's usually the story that you created in your mind that's actually happening. Like for example, if everything like let's say you get into a car wreck and like literally everything, it's just the way you look at it. So if you see like everything went wrong, you could see like, oh, everything actually did go right. I survived the car wreck. I did not get hurt in the car wreck. And like literally, it's just the way you see it. So normally, when I find myself saying, "Oh, everything horrible happened," it's like, wait, that's just the story I'm telling myself. It's actually a lot of good things did happen today. I had a great meal. I did this. I did that. Like a lot of good things did happen. So we have to realize that our brain does not perceive reality as it is. We see it based off the stories that we tell ourselves. So if you're always looking and you're always saying things are wrong or whatever it may be, you can alter that story you tell yourself to be a little bit happier of a person. And I think that's a huge mindset shift as well, is like that's the altering that story you tell yourself.
Yeah, I think that society doesn't reward that kind of mindset up until now, right? Because when
Mm-hmm.
you get together with people, everybody moans and complains. They complain about the fact that something's not going right at work, or that this bill came in, or when we get together, and I realized this years ago that I would get together with friends and
Yeah.
we would sit and bellyache. And I almost
Mm-hmm.
felt guilty talking about things that were going right. And
Yeah.
what happens is when you surround yourself with everybody and everything that focuses on the negativity, that is all you see. Because we have a reticular activating system in our heads that filters out the things that it doesn't think we need to see. And so if you're not telling yourself that things are great, if you're telling yourself that things are crummy, then your reticular activator goes out and finds every opportunity to show you you're right. And so
Mhm.
programming in that reticular activator to go out and show you all the things you want, not what you don't want, all the things that go right, not all the things that go wrong, can help to set us up for a whole lot of positivity and seeing life in a totally different way.
Yeah. It's also important to realize that humans naturally have a confirmation bias. So if you like if you are always identifying with being a negative person, you are going to have that confirmation bias where you only see yourself as a negative person. Like every single attribute that happens, you're only going to see that as a negative thing that reinforces that original identity. And that's where you have to really question that and realize that we are human and we don't have a set identity. Victor right now is going to be a completely different Victor that works on his business. It's going to be a completely different Victor around his friends. There's all these certain sets of identities that we have around our environment that we have, and you can alter those identities. So it's important to realize that we don't have this like set identity. It doesn't exist. We're always changing. We're always evolving. We just don't always realize it. So that's where it's important to realize that you can alter that identity, and rather than saying, "Hey, I'm a negative person. It's just the way you are." No, it's actually not. Like you can actually be a positive person. It's possible. You just have to be willing to change. Going down to awareness. You have to first realize that it's not okay up here. It's like, cool, okay, awesome. What can we do to have that conversation inside your head to become a more positive person? And it all starts with having that awareness and having that conversation with yourself and getting to that point, really.
Yeah, well, and I would ask the question, how is that working for you? If you're always saying, oh, I'm always a negative person, or oh, I always, everybody always cuts me off, or oh, so I'm always then, then what happens? You see everybody cutting you off. Then
Hmm.
how is that serving you? That's just perpetuating a reality that you don't want to live. But there is an alternate reality that's happening, which you pointed out when you got in that accident. You had the option that you could actually decide how you saw that situation and what story you created around it. The meaning that we give the things that we experience is way more important than the experience itself. And so when you give the meaning to that car accident as, oh, I walked away, I'm so grateful my car held up, and
Hmm.
or maybe it got demolished and I've been meaning to replace it anyway and now the insurance company pays for it. Or if you
Hmm.
see it in that aspect as opposed to, yeah, see, just another thing to ruin my day, then you see things differently. You get to choose. That's the thing that people don't realize, that we are all creating the life that we're living, first and foremost by the thoughts that we're thinking, and second by the meaning that we're giving to those thoughts.
Yeah. That's so true. We define all the meaning with the experiences that we have. Like all the experiences we have no meaning by themselves. Like for example, like this conversation like has no meaning until I give it meaning of what is actually happening within this conversation. But we usually give more meaning based off the story that we tell ourselves, and that's where we apply more. I'll say learning juice, more remember juice, to actually remember that event. So no matter if a million good things happen in your day and you constantly identify with being a negative person, you're going to remember that one negative thing that happened, and that's going to completely alter everything you have. And I think the best way to start that mindset shift is by listening to more positive information. Because back in the day, it used to be the five friends that were always around you. Now, these days, it's about the content you consume. That's like one of the biggest time allocations that we have. We're always consuming content more than we are than talking with people most of the time. And that's where if you alter that same information, to be a more positive rather than looking at the news and saying the world's burning, the world's dead. Guys, 1,000 years ago, we were eating moldy bread and drinking muddy water. Like back in the day, there was no better time to live than right now. So regardless of what the news says, regardless of what everyone says, this is the best time to be alive. And that's where we have to have that mindset shift and start looking at more positive information to really start that process of becoming a little bit more positive of a person.
Yeah, and my husband's a news junkie. I am
Uh
just
huh.
the opposite. And I will always say to him, "And what are you going to do with that information?"
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So because it's one thing to be aware, right? It's good to have knowledge of what's going on in the world, but it's a whole nother thing when you're watching the 24/7 same stories over and over and over. And I was like, what is that doing for you? And where are you going with that information? Are you going to volunteer out in the Ukraine? Are you sending money? Are you flying people there? Like what are you doing as a result of the information you're consuming? And if it's just okay, I need to know that, shut it off. But a lot of people internalize that and get a huge amount of stress and anxiety over the news that they're watching. And so I would caution people to take a step back, to read the Cliff Note version, and then move on with your day and not focus so much on that unless you have a way to make a difference that you plan to implement.
And you have to remember the humans have a natural negativity bias. So in news anchors and news stations will use that and always have usually a negative twist because that's what people react to. So they're not going to tell you the world's amazing, everyone, like it's everything good's happening. No, because that's not what we remember. That's not what we react to. So they're going to say the world sucks. Like here's why. This person said something mean and you should hate that. And then you're going to share that information. You're going to react to it. You're going to usually obsess about it most of the time. And that's their job to get you to react and get you to do something so you remember the information and share it. And I have now that I realize that, I know that when I see a news station, I'm like, wow, that's so stupid. Like they're trying to get me to react. I'm like, that's just like dumb to do that. And what I realize is humans also try to be the most updated because they they feel a sense of, I want to say, superiority, that they're the most updated with the information. So when they're in their group or whatever, they have the most updated information, so that way they can tell people about that information. So that's what I've also seen of why people like to look at the news, so that way they always have that sense of like, oh, here's what's happening in the world and I'm better because I have this information.
Well,
It's usually what I see.
it's interesting that you say that. I chuckle because
Uh-huh.
so many times when we would be at parties, I wouldn't know what the heck people were talking about, right?
Yeah.
So I would, they would say something and I would base my reaction on what everybody else was reacting. Like if they were like, oh, I'd be like, oh my gosh. Or if they were laughing, I'd be like, ah, yeah, that's right. And I would
Yeah.
just follow along because of what you're saying, because I felt less than because I wasn't up to speed. Nowadays, I'm like, yeah, I don't know, have a clue what you're talking about. You want to clue me in? And then and I don't feel badly for not knowing what they're talking about because it's not something on my purview and it's not something of importance to me. And I'm happy to be into the conversation if you care to share it with me, but I'm not going to create so much of my time keeping up with that so that I could have a conversation during a party or a networking event or something along those lines.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Michael Singer said it the best, of saying like it's really okay not to be okay. And like first like starting out with that in your head. And I really do think like happiness comes with peace of mind. And I think that comes with the internal voices that we have in our head, where they're all in peace and coordination with each other. And when I say voices, if someone put a piece of cake right in front of me, there's going to be two voices that usually happen in most people's head. It's going to be the voice that's saying, eat the cake, that's going to taste so good. And then the other voice is saying, you don't need the calories, don't eat the cake. And that's what I mean by voices, in case people think I'm a crazy person. I am crazy, but not that crazy. Um, And so when it comes down to having those conflict, even that simple of a conflict, it's about having the peace between them and them being able to communicate rather than because when the voices in your head are not okay and they're always conflicting with each other, that means you're going to naturally want to do something to silence them, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, whether it's working 24/7. A lot of people do a million things to silence the voices in their head. And once you get in a place where they are in peace with each other and you actually have a conversation saying like, okay, maybe it's okay to eat half of this cake and I'll save the other half for later. Like there are ways to have peace within your mind, and you just have to be willing to have those conversations. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you need to feel the feelings. I think that so many of us don't feel the feelings, right? You don't
Yeah.
feel the feelings of guilt. You don't feel the feelings of shame. You don't feel the feelings of sadness. You don't feel the feel, the ones that we feel that are acceptable are anger and overwhelm, right? But the other ones, the other quote unquote negative feelings, fear and sadness and all of these others, we have been trained that that's a bad thing to feel. We don't want to feel that. So instead, we do as you said, some of us exercise like crazy or
Mhm.
work like crazy or do the alcohol thing or the drugs, and we have some of us just might binge watch Netflix when we're really like that, right?
Yeah.
Pick your poison. But
Uh,
there feeling the feelings, it is better because when you process the feelings, you actually give them permission to let go. And when you and it's way quicker, it's much more energy to hold on to those emotions and those thoughts than it is to take a deep breath and actually feel them. It might be 5 minutes, it might be 15 minutes, but I can guarantee you it's not going to be months and years and decades.
yeah.
You'll process through that emotion when you give yourself permission to do that. And when you do that, it releases that energy and it allows space for the happiness to come in.
Yeah. I used to never give myself permission to feel pain or sadness. And what I got to a point where like I said like, hey, it's okay to feel sadness, it's okay to feel pain, it's a normal human emotion. And once I got to that place, rather than every time I felt sadness I would feel shame for myself and I would shame that emotion, now when I'm sad I'm like, okay, I'm sad and I don't know why. Like, let's talk about this. Like, let's figure out where in my head what voice is sad. And and now we're able to have that conversation, and like I said, like you said, processing the emotion and get like having that conversation within my head, and now I'm able to process it and it's able to move on. And rather than keeping it up in a ball and having it constantly come out in super weird ways through insecurities and other things like that, now I'm able to process those emotions and it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's like it's really able to come out of you a lot faster when you say, hey, I'm sad and I don't know why, so let's figure it out.
Yeah. And if you got to cry, you cry it
Yeah.
out.
Hmm.
I'll give you an example. My husband and I were planning a trip to Italy. It was a really big thing because very rarely does he get vacation in the middle of summer. And we were meeting 5 other couples over there. It was a big deal. We waited for an entire year. I got a whole new wardrobe to take with me to Italy. And fast forward, we were like 3 days from leaving. And all of a sudden, I had this weird thing in my eye, and it almost looked like a fuzziness, and it almost looked like a daddy long leg spider in this like gelatin that was floating in my eye. And I blinked a couple of times thinking maybe, it's just kind of weird and I'll blink it away. And I didn't. So I called my eye doctor and I said, hey, I think I should just come in. You'll put some drops in or a patch or something. They'll be like, ho, 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 like pirate or something. But I was never expecting it to go where it went. She said, absolutely not. You need to go see a specialist. I was like, what? Who's going to see me on a moment's notice, a specialist? She goes, call this place. They got me in within like 3 hours. What had happened was my retina had not only torn, but had started to detach. And so it was emergency laser surgery. And
Wow.
I ended up having to cancel this trip. Now we paid for tickets, airline tickets that were non-refundable. I cried. I cried over not being able to do the trip. I cried over losing all the money. I cried over not having the experience with my husband and my friends. I was angry. I was like, why does it have to happen now? And I did that. And I laid in bed for like a day and a half, just, well, I laid in bed for a couple of hours, but then I got up the next day, and throughout the day, I would have sad moments where I would burst into tears. And I allowed myself for the first time to do that. And within 24 hours, I had processed through that emotion, and I could come to the point of gratitude, right? I was grateful, like you were saying about the accident. I was grateful on the fact that we caught it before I left. We caught it where I didn't need major surgery. We did it when it was here in the States, not over in Italy.
Mhm.
I didn't lose my eyesight. Yeah, it sucked laying on the sofa for a week with my eyes closed, but instead of being in Italy with my friends, but I was still able to see as a result of making that choice and that decision. So you
Mhm.
never know what life is going to hand you, but being able to process through those emotions, cry it out, scream it out, yell it out. My mom used to say, scream into a pillow, like, ah, or go out and throw something, throw a pillow across the room if you have to get that emotion out. But that'll allow you to process through it to get to the other side of happiness. Otherwise, you're just keeping it bottled and it keeps bubbling up. And you're never really getting rid of it and making room for the happiness and the gratitude to come in.
Yeah. And we're always masking a lot of the things through our insecurities that we have. And like for example, like no matter how skinny I got, I would always think I'm fat. And it made it where I would work out 3 hours a day and saying I love working out. I like this is what I love doing. And going to that point, and I eventually asked myself like why? Like why do I have to work out so much? Like why no matter how skinny I get, why do I always think I'm fat? It's like, oh, it's because I'm not comfortable with who I am. I was thinking that once I have a perfect body, then someone will love me. Then I have permission to love myself. And once I questioned the whole thing and saying, hey, I could love myself for who I am right now. I don't have to have an amazing body or anything. And once I got to that point, it's like, okay, cool. I don't need to work out. Like I really don't. It's like it's not a huge necessity. I work out a little bit like country dancing, but that's basically it. I don't have to work out to have this like amazing body. And and like every insecurity I unmask and kind of cycle through and ask like why behind it, the less I feel like I need to do. Really, like I used to work 14 hours a day on my business and then work out and do all these things, but every insecurity I unmask, it's like what's the point? Like you really just like don't need to do all these things. So the more like I would really dive into like why you do things, and then the insecurities kind of unmask themselves. It's really fascinating about it.
It is, and a lot of that stems from what we've been taught, right? What society, teachers, parents, peers have instilled. They're other people's beliefs, other people's desires that we have just taken on as our own and don't even realize it. And so, you hear stories all the time about people who go to school for one thing because they thought their parents wanted them to do it. And one day they wake up and they're miserable and they really want to do something in the total different direction. And so realizing why we're doing something, why we're thinking something, why we're feeling something, and then say, is it serving me? And if not, then I have the ability, I can make the decision to change it because we're all one decision away from a totally different life. And
Hmm.
so just making that simple decision to see things differently will give you a different outcome.
Yeah. And then the realization that we can change. A lot of people in the negative mindset, they constantly think that it's just the way I am. Like that's it. Like, and you have to realize that we're always changing. We just don't always realize it. And once you realize that you can change for the better, then things become a lot more possible. But you first have to realize you can change, and then start that path of awareness, realizing that these thoughts are just our thoughts, and these are not things that are you, that these were thoughts that were given to you over time. And once you pick those apart, then you have a lot more ability to really see who you are and change who you are.
If
But
you
I think
want
it all
to.
starts with that, like being able to change.
Right. If you want to, right?
Yeah.
Once you see who you are, you might love it or you might accept it, right? You might say, "Yeah, I'm somebody who doesn't like to work out and that's okay. I'm going to just accept who I am." Or you might say, "I really want to be somebody who fill in the blank, loves working out or works out or whatever the situation is." And then you can decide to take the steps to get there, but knowing why you're doing it, not because somebody else wants you to, but because you really want it, will help you get there so much faster.
And I think the biggest reason why people refuse to change is because they subconsciously think that they don't deserve a happy life. They don't deserve to feel happiness. Where some people will actually shame themselves when they feel happy. They think it's actually a bad emotion, so they think that they don't deserve it. And I think one of the biggest things I've done with myself is I said I forgive myself. Like I don't know for what. Like I don't know what I did to make it where I didn't think I forgive myself, or for what thing I did do, but like one of the biggest things I do now is I forgive myself. If I make like I used to make when I made a small mistake, I used to like criticize myself saying, "Oh my gosh, how could you do this?" But then I said, I forgive myself. Like it's not a huge deal. Though the world is still turning. I'm still alive. I'm still in a good health. Like the world is not going to fall apart. And once you realize that, then life becomes so much better when you start forgiving yourself for your mistakes that you do, and you're able to live life, rather you're able to live it in the present rather than always dwelling it on the past, saying, "Oh my gosh, how could I do that? How could this happen?" And forgiving yourself is a huge eye opener, and just giving your permission to forgive yourself is a huge mindset shift as well.
I agree. I totally agree. I also feel like people are so used to feeling a certain way that even though they don't like feeling that way, it's something that's comfortable to them. It's something
Yeah.
that's familiar to them. And happiness, for somebody who's sad all the time, happiness is unfamiliar. It's almost uncomfortable because they're not used to it. They're used to that misery and they're comfortable there even if they don't want to be there. So it's when we get to that point where we're like, yeah, I'm going to do things that are uncomfortable for me now because I don't want to be here anymore, that things actually change, right?
Mhm.
You have to be comfortable getting uncomfortable and doing things you haven't done in order to get places you haven't been.
Yeah. And you gotta hate where you are enough to actually start moving to where you want to go. And it like if people are comfortable in misery and they want to stay there their whole lives, awesome. I am not telling you like how to live your life. And if you want to be there are lots and lots of people that are comfortable in misery and love the negative mindset. They love the drama, they love the news, they love those things, and the mind with the negativity bias is naturally drawn to those things. So I understand why they are like that. But if you are actually saying, "Hey Victor, hey Amy, I want to change and get better," then boom, awesome. Like you know that you need to start listening to more positive content. You know that you need to start being more aware of your thoughts and realizing you can change, and giving your permission to be sad, giving your permission to feel those things, so that way you can actually be a more holistic person, have those more positive conversations. But like you said, a lot of people would rather be miserable, which is crazy to think about, really.
Well, but they're used to that, right? That is their norm. But I'm here to tell them, I'm here to tell all of the listeners today and viewers that it doesn't have to be. Your past doesn't predict your future. I give the analogy of the windshield, right? The windshield of a car is huge. The rear view mirror is really small. And so we don't need to focus so much on our past. It doesn't dictate our future. And I know that Wayne Dyer used to give an analogy of a boat. And when you're in a boat and you have a motor, there's a wake that goes out the back of the boat as you're going over the water. And the question is, Does the wake direct the boat? Does the wake direct the boat? No, it doesn't. The energy of the motor and the direction that we're going forward directs the boat, not what's happening behind. And the same is true for our lives. So just because you have had a crummy, beginning or had a rough couple of years doesn't mean you're not worthy, that you are not worth it, that you can't have a better future. You just need to leave that stuff behind.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like just going to the back to the point, if you ever have a voice inside your head that says you're not worthy or that you can't change or anything else, you first have to realize that that thought did not come from yourself. That was given to you by someone else. And once you realize that, you can start identifying what those thoughts are and start picking it apart and asking why. So if you have a voice inside yourself that says you're not worthy, then you could start saying, okay, why? And then just having that conversation is like, well, because you aren't. Like, look at these things. It's like, well, look at these things that show me that I am worthy. And then then you're gonna be like in a whole like kind of your identity is kind of gonna shake a little bit from asking these questions, because every single one of these voices that you ask why and go through that, they're like eventually they're gonna have nothing. Like if you ask why enough times, they're gonna say, well, it's just the way I am. And then like eventually you'll get to that point and then you say, this isn't necessary. Like for when I always thought I need to work out because I always thought I was fat. It's just once you get to enough whys, you realize that the whole thing's BS. None of it matters. It was just some random thing that my brain picked up. And that's what 99% of our brain is. So if you ever want to understand and go through these negative insecurities or mindsets or whatever it may be, if you ask why behind each one of these, you'll eventually figure out it's all BS that your brain picks up and that there's really no reasoning behind. So our brain
Well,
is
I would
really good at
challenge you a little
rationalizing.
bit on that, Victor, a little
Yeah.
bit. Joe Stumpf does something called 7 layers deep or something along those lines, where you do that exercise that you're talking about,
Mhm.
where you say something like, I want to be thin. Why is being thin important to me? Because then I can fit into my clothes. Why is fitting in your clothes important to me? Because then I'll look good. Why is looking good important to me? And you go down. And what happens is when you do the exercise, the first four, maybe even five, are all reasons that you think. And then you get to a point where it's reasons that you feel. And so the reason that you want to lose weight or you is because you want to be alive for great grandkids. Your great grandmother, your grandmother, your mother all died of diabetes and overweight, and you don't want to be that generation. And so that's why you really want to do it, right? You want to be here for your family, for multiple generations after. You don't want to die early. And so that might be really the underlying reason why. And when you go down deep enough, you get out of the reasons in your head of what you've told yourself, and you get down here into the reasons of your heart, and you really find the reasons that you do the things that you do.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That was really well said. And what else, what other advice would you have for someone to get out of the normal default mode, or I guess the survival mode that you talked about? What other advice would you give someone to get out of that survivalistic default mode to becoming a more happier person? What other advice would you have?
Well, I told you how we start our day, right? Victor and I start our days with gratitude. I wanted to share a couple of other things with
Yeah.
everybody. I don't just start my day with positivity, I end my day with positivity. And so at the end of the day, how many, maybe you do this, Victor, maybe not, you're pretty well aware, but so many people go to sleep and when their head hits the pillow, they think of all the things that went wrong, right? The conversations that didn't go right, the things that didn't get done, the things they wish they had done better, all the negativity, right? All the things that didn't go right. And doing that, studies have shown that that sets you up for more negativity the next day. And so once I learned this, I started to implement an evening routine where just as I'm falling asleep, I look for one thing, just one that went right. just one. And sometimes I've had a crummy day, and the one thing was back what my grandpa said, and that I woke up today. And then the second right thing was that I got up today. But looking for on a scavenger hunt, looking through to find one thing that went right will set you up for the gratitude that you start your day with the next day. So that's something that I wanted to share with everybody that can get them back, thinking more positively and get their mind fixated on looking for the positivity and the happiness and the things in life. The other thing that I wanted to share, two more. The other thing I wanted to share were
Yeah.
acts of kindness. When I'm feeling really crappy, I go out and I do something nice for somebody else. It doesn't even matter what it is. And it doesn't cost money, right? It can be a simple phone call to someone you haven't talked to in a while. It can be actually having a conversation with the cashier at a grocery store. It could be taking the cart and putting it away for somebody. Doing acts of kindness has been scientifically proven to give you a shot of those feel good chemicals of serotonin and dopamine that make you feel good. And here's something very interesting that I learned recently, that even if you don't do it, if you see somebody doing it, it gives you a shot of dopamine and serotonin. So looking at videos of somebody doing a good deed for someone else can also increase that serotonin, those feel good chemicals in our body that can get us put on the right track. And the last thing that I wanted to share with everybody is what I call a bliss list. Do you do a bliss list,
I
Victor?
have no idea what that is.
Okay, a bliss list. And I do this especially when I'm feeling crummy, especially when I'm feeling sad. I sit down and I write out the things that make me happy. Now, I'm not talking about, a trip to Europe, a trip to Italy. Does it make me happy? Yeah. I have fun in Italy. I would have fun in Italy. But the little things in our everyday lives, like the fact that my dog greets me every day in the morning when I go to the bathroom, or the fact that when I have a pop-it shot in my basement, one of those basketball things, and I go down, and when I'm in a crappy mood, I'll take a cup. I'm terrible at it. I'm like, I get like 20 points, guys. I'm not really good. But it makes me giggle and laugh because it has a voice on there that's like, you just got 3 points. I'm like, yes. And they're like, how many more do you need before you actually get one in the basket? And I'm like, be quiet. And it takes me out of my situation and it brings me happiness. Sometimes you can just get happiness by walking in nature or hearing birds singing. There's a variety of things that we have in our lives that don't cost money. And if we write down the things that bring us bliss, then we review it, then we will start programming our brains to actually go out and find more of it. And so these are concrete, scientifically proven ways to increase your happiness, to increase your positivity. And when we do that, we see life so much differently.
I always think about the brain in like a biological sense, and when it comes down to our thoughts that we have, like all our thoughts have some level of energy behind them, and whatever mindset you want, you're giving energy to those neural connections to strengthen those. So if you're in a negative mindset, you are giving energy to that side of your brain that involves a negative energy. But if you want to give more energy to be having a more positive mindset, you have to give more energy to those neural connections. And that's where you really have to go through that process, or having a bliss list, thinking about gratitude. That's why these things work, is because you're giving more energy to those neural connections to strengthen those rather than focusing on the negative. Because it all goes back to what I said about the story that we tell ourselves. If you tell yourselves that the world is ending and everything sucks, that is all you will see. And those neural connections are going to be strong because that's all you will see within the world, and you'll that confirmation bias will reinforce that. But if the opposite is also true. If you only see the world as amazing, you are only going to see the amazing things in the world, and the negative things are going to be a lot harder to see. So that's where the opposite is true as well. So whatever mindset you do end up choosing that you want, it's important to realize that there are these biases behind those to and the energy that you give yourself behind those neural connections are really important as well.
Yeah, a great example of this is Thanksgiving in my house. We usually have extended family come over, and there are some people in the family that, let's say, would get under my skin, right? And
Yeah.
I intentionally one year said that I am going to have the happiest, most content, non-dramatic Thanksgiving on record. And I focused on all the positivity, the fact that all the kids went out and played kickball, and the kids helped. We all got together and told everybody what we're thankful for. And I focused on all these things. And at the end, when my siblings would, had a conversation with me and was like, "Can you believe so and so said this?" And I was like, I never even heard them say that. And it was because I had activated my brain to only focus on things that were going to be positive. I didn't even hear. She said, "How did you not hear it? The person was sitting right next to you." And I was like, "Really? Was I in that conversation?" Because I literally do not even remember hearing that. And so, yes, we give out certain vibrations by the energy that we have, that we're transmitting. And by that energy, it's also a magnet. So it brings that energy back. Whatever we're putting out, we're also getting back. And we know this intrinsically, whether you believe it, whether you think it's woo woo or any of that. I mean, think about it. When you come into contact with someone who's in a really bad mood, that energy is so different than somebody who is so excited about something that has just happened. And that difference in vibration is what gets put out into the world, and that comes back at them. It's like a boomerang. So knowing this is how it works, we now have the capability to make the decision on what energy we're sending out, depending on what energy we want to get back.
Yeah, I love that. Is there anything else that you want to make sure we mention today before we sign off? I know you had a few other points. Did you want to go through a few of those real fast?
No, I think we've covered most of the points that I wanted to cover. I do encourage people. I love to connect with people, so please connect with me on whatever your platform of preference is. I'm on, you guys. I'm even on TikTok now. I'm even
Woo!
on TikTok. So, please connect with me on different platforms. And I have a variety of things that I put out that help you with managing your mindset, with shifting your mindset. I think I mentioned about the 12 ways to shift your mindset from a negative to a positive. If people are interested, we can put the link in for the show notes, and then people can download that free download as my gift.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, thank you. That's awesome. Is there anything else that like any other your website or anything else you want to share before we sign off?
Yeah. All right. I'll run down a couple of things. I am a
Yeah.
transformational public speaker, like I said, who help people who feel stuck in a rut and lost their happiness to shift their mindset to go from surviving to thriving in their personal and professional lives. And I do have some openings available for my speaking. And so if you know of somebody or you're looking for a transformational speaker, I would love to have a conversation. You can go to the website that's being posted here, which is theamyfuentes.com, because I'm the one and only amyfuentes.com. And I also have a book. For those of you who would love the book, I have a book that you can get on Amazon called Words of Wisdom: What You Need to Know on the Road of Your Life's Journey. And it's not like the normal books. When I say normal books, they're normally novels. This is something that you can put on a coffee table or a nightstand. As a matter of fact, I went in and saw my mom recently, and she had it in her powder room. She had it in her
Oh.
bathroom. And I said, "Why are you keeping my book in your bathroom?" And she says, "Because I have a captive audience there, Aim." So it's a great book if you're looking for some happiness or need to give it as a gift to somebody who's going through a difficult life transition, whether that's a divorce or empty nest, retirement, death of a loved one. We go through life's transitions, and this is a perfect pick me up for that as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Amy, thank you so much for joining today. Thank you, everyone, for watching. This is the Mind Workshop podcast, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks, guys.